Stitch number 20 is the woven picot or detached woven picot stitch. This is a nice 3D stitch. Look at that. It's very nice for stitching leaves, or maybe make little 3D flower petals. Let's have a look at it. In the template, I've drawn these upside down T shapes inside the T, and that is to help you position and decide on the length of the stitches. Of course, you can do them any size you want. And here again, on my little sampler, I have drawn the T shapes. So you will need a pin to do this stitch. If you haven't got a pin, and especially a fine pin, then you can also use a fine needle. It's just easier with the pin because it has the little thing at the top here. Right, so at the top of one of these T shapes, I'm going to insert the pin and then have it stick out below the bottom of my T shape. And then I come up on the left side of the bottom, or you could come up on the right side. And then I wrap the thread around the needle, and then I insert the needle on the other side of the shape. So because this is a woven stitch, it is necessary to have an uneven number of base stitches. So in this case we have 3. So I come up in the middle to make my 3rd stitch, and then I wrap the thread around the needle again, and now I can start weaving the thread. So I weave the needle under the first leg here, and then over the middle one and under the second one, or the 3rd one. So I find this stitch easiest to work when I keep turning it. As you go, make sure that you push each pass downwards so that they're compacted together. Right, so because I finished under this stitch, now I go over it, and then I go under the middle one and over the 3rd one. And then to go back, I go under the first one, over the middle one, and under the last one. And I just use the needle to compact the threads down. When you're working the stitch, it's important that you don't pull the thread too tightly going sideways. You want to stick as close as possible to having the two side lines that you started with. Right, so now I'm going back again. So finished under, so I'm starting over, going under the middle and over the other side. And every other pass or so, I just use the needle to push the threads together. Right, so now I'm almost at the end of this. So I think I've got a couple more passes and then it's finished. Let's have a look. I think I can squeeze a couple more under there. You really want to cover the little legs of the stitch. So I finished with the thread going under this leg here. So I'll bring the needle and thread over that, but instead of going under the middle stitch, I just insert the needle into the same hole as the middle stitch, and then I can finish it off on the back. And you might want to just sometimes adjust it a little bit so that it looks a bit more even. And once you've done doing the whole little leaf, you can take the pin out. And the reason why you want the smallest pin that you can find is that it actually, I don't know if you can see it, it makes a tiny little hole at the top there. So you don't want to use something that's the size of a tapestry needle, for example, unless that's the look you're going for. So let's try it on the sampler. Because of the direction that the stitch lies in, I would strongly recommend starting at the top of the letter so that you're not trying to stitch underneath something you have already stitched. So the 3 stitches at the top are shorter than the other ones, so that they will fit nicely inside the letter. So insert the pin at the top, and then I come out just below the shape. And then I come up on the left side and wrap the thread around the needle. Insert the needle on the right, and then I come up in the middle, or as close to the center as I can. Sometimes it's difficult to get past the pin. And then wrap the thread around the pin again. And then I start by weaving under, and then I go over, and then I go under. Turn the hoop so I can work the other way. So I finished under, so now I start over, under, over. So this one won't take long because it's short. And I'm using 3 strands of thread. That also helps to build it up quicker. But you can use 2 strands if you prefer a slightly more subtle look. I like the texture of it when you use 3 strands. And especially when it's combined with a variegated thread like this. And remember to occasionally compress the threads a little bit. So now I can see that I made this stitch here slightly longer than the other 2. So it's probably going to be visible. Well, let's see. I think if I pass the thread over and then finish it in the middle, I think that'll be alright. There we go, so that's the first one done. So now, if I was just stitching it, I would stitch the other 2, but I want to show you doing the next one that is overlapping. So I'm inserting the pin at the top of the next shape, and then I'm ready to stitch it. This is another stitch where you want to make sure that you have enough thread to finish it, because it's really awkward to stop and start the thread in the middle of this, as you can probably imagine. Right, so come up on the left, wrap the thread around the pin and insert the needle on the right. And then I come up in the middle again and wrap the thread around the pin, and then I'm ready to start weaving, and I start by going under, over and under. So now, because we have a stitch just next to where we are working, it's really important to make sure that you don't catch it as you're coming back this way. What you can do is use the eye of the needle, or use a tapestry needle that has a blunt tip, so you don't catch the stitching with the tip of your sharp needle. Although there is the risk of catching the previous stitching, I do prefer to go with the tip first, because when you go with the eye first, the thread has a tendency to twist more than if you just do it straight on with the point of the needle. And remember, with this stitch, you do not go under the fabric as you're working across the threads here. You're simply working over these 3 threads. Because if you catch the fabric, then the stitch is no longer a detached stitch. Oh, I like this where the color changes quite abruptly. Here it's more subtle, but here it just changes from this sort of khaki green to a more orangey red. That's fun. That's why I like variegated threads. Right, I think one more pass and then it's done. So just come under the right leg to cover that a bit more. And then I insert the needle in the middle. And then I can take out the pin. And then they sit there nicely overlapping each other. So as you're working the template, work them in rows. I think that would be easiest. So work this row first, and then this one that overlaps those ones. Then do the single one here, and then there's 2 more overlapping, and then there's a pattern now. So a single one, and then 2, and a single and 2. So happy stitching. The tutorial you have just watched is part of a series of 31 stitch tutorials that I have made to go along with the pattern for this embroidery stitch sampler. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial. If you want to check out the pattern, you can find the link in the description. And whatever you're making, happy stitching.